Hello, welcome back. It's another day clean and sober. My name is John Clayton. I'm a recovering drug addict and alcoholic. I've been clean since February 21st, 2021. Thank you for joining me today. Now we're going to continue on with Chapter 4. However, Chapter 4 is quite a bit long, so I might end up breaking it up into a couple of videos because sometimes the longer I read, the harder it gets to understand me. And well, since I have no teeth, that probably doesn't help much either. Okay, so where were we? We were on Chapter 4. The section was how it works. Starting with step 1. We admitted that we were powerless over our addiction, that our lives had become unmanageable. It doesn't matter what or how much we used. In Narcotics Anonymous, staying clean has to come first. We realize that we cannot use drugs and live. When we admit our powerlessness and our inability to manage our own lives, we open the door to recovery. No one could convince us that we were addicts. It is an admission that we have to make for ourselves. When some of us have doubts, we ask ourselves this question: can I control my use of any form or mind or mood altering chemicals? Most addicts will see that control is impossible the moment it is suggested. Whatever the outcome, we find that we cannot control our using for any length of time. This would clearly suggest that an addict has no control over drugs. Powerlessness means using drugs against our will. If we can't stop using, how can we tell ourselves we are in control? The inability to stop using, even with the greatest willpower and the most sincere desire, is what we mean when we say we have absolutely no choice. However, we do have a choice after we stop trying to justify our using. We didn't stumble into this fellowship brimming with love, honesty, and open-mindedness or willingness. We reached a point where we could no longer continue using because of physical, mental, and spiritual pain. When we were beaten, we became willing. Our inability to control our usage of drugs is a symptom of the disease of addiction. We are powerless not only over drugs, but over our addiction as well. We need to admit this fact in order to recover. An addiction is a physical, mental, and spiritual disease that affects every area of our lives. The physical aspect of our disease is the compulsive use of drugs, the inability to stop using once we have started. The mental aspect of our disease is the obsession, or the overpowering desire to use, even when we are destroying our lives. The spiritual part of our disease is our total self-centeredness. We felt that we could stop whenever we wanted to, despite all evidence to the contrary. Denial, substitution, rationalization, justification, distrust of others, guilt, embarrassment, dereliction, degradation, isolation, and loss of control are all results of our disease. Our disease is progressive, incurable, and fatal. Most of us are relieved to find out we have a disease instead of a moral deficiency. We are not responsible for our disease, but we are responsible for our recovery. Most of us tried to stop using on our own, but we were unable to live with or without drugs. Eventually, we realized that we were powerless over our addiction. Many of us tried to stop using on sheer willpower. This action was a temporary solution. We saw that willpower alone could not work for any length of time. We tried countless other remedies, psychiatrists, hospitals, recovery houses, lovers, new towns, new jobs. Everything that we tried failed. We began to see that we had rationalized the most outrageous sort of nonsense to justify the mess that we made of our lives with drugs. Until we let go of our reservations, no matter what they are, the foundation of our recovery is in danger. Reservations rob us of our benefits that this program has to offer. In ridding ourselves of all reservations, we surrender. Then and only then can we be helped to recover from the disease of addiction. Now, the question is, if we are powerless, how can Narcotics Anonymous help? We begin by asking for help. The foundation of our program is the admission that we of ourselves do not have power over our addiction. When we can accept the fact that we have completed the first part of step 1, a second admission must be made before our foundation is complete. If we stop here, we will know only half the truth. We are great ones for manipulating the truth. We say we say on one hand, yes, I am powerless over my addiction, and on the other hand, when I get my life together, I can handle drugs. Such thoughts and actions lead us back to active addiction. It never occurred to us to ask, if we can't control our addiction, how can we control our lives? We felt miserable without drugs, and our lives were unmanageable. Unemployability, dereliction, and destruction are easily seen as characteristics of an unmanageable life. Our families generally are disappointed, baffled, and confused by our actions, and often desert or disown us. Becoming employed, socially acceptable, and reunited with our families does not make our lives manageable. Social acceptability does not equal recovery. We have found that we had no choice except to completely change our old ways of thinking or go back to using. When we give our best, it works for us as it has worked for others. When we could no longer stand our old ways, we began to change. From that point forward, we began to see that every clean day is a successful day, no matter what happens. Surrender means not having to fight anymore. We accept our addiction and life the way it is. We become willing to do whatever is necessary to stay clean, even the things we don't like doing. Until we look step 1 Until we took step 1, we were full of fear and doubt. At this point, many of us felt lost and confused. We felt different. Upon working the step, we affirmed our surrender to the principles of NA. Only after surrender are we able to overcome the alienation of addiction. Help for addicts begins only when we are able to admit complete defeat. Thus can be frightening, but it is the foundation. Complete defeat. This can be frightening, but it is the foundation on which we built our lives. And I think I read that sentence completely twice. So I apologize for that. Step 1 means that we know that we do not have to use, and this is a great freedom. It took a while for some of us to realize that our lives had become unmanageable. For others, the unmanageability of their lives was the only thing that was clear. We knew in our hearts that drugs had the power to change us into someone and we didn't want to be. Being clean and working the steps, we are released from our chains. However, none of the steps work by magic. We do not just say the words on this step. We learn to live them. We see for ourselves that the program has something to offer us. We have found hope. We learn to function in the world in which we live. We can find meaning and purpose in life and be rescued from insanity, depravity, and death. When we admit our powerlessness and inability to manage our own lives, we open the door for a power greater than ourselves to help us. It is not where we were that counts, but where we're going. Wow, and that was step 1. That was a big one for me. Coming to grips with the fact that I no longer can do it on my own. That, I had to, it's unfortunate that, I had to hit my bottom pretty bad before I was finally able to get help. But even as much as I wish it could have happened like 20 or 30 years ago, at least I'm clean and sober now. And even though I feel like I've lost out on quite a bit, it seems to be a lot harder to try and I want to, I guess what I'm getting at is, when I'm on my deathbed, and I get asked, what did you do with your life? I don't want my answer to be absolutely nothing, that it was all for nothing. Okay, let's see if we can go on to step 2. We came to believe that a power greater than ourselves could restore us to sanity. The second step is necessary if we expect to achieve ongoing recovery. The first step leaves us with the need to believe in something that can help us with our powerlessness, uselessness, and helplessness. The first step has left a vacuum in our lives. We need to find something to fill that void. This is the purpose of the second step. Some of us didn't take this step seriously. At first, we passed over it with a minimum of concern, only to find the next step would not work until we worked step 2. Even when we admitted that we needed help with our drug problem, many of us could not admit to the need for faith and sanity. We have a disease, progressive, incurable, and fatal. One way or another, We went out and bought our destruction on a time payment plan. All of us, from the junkie snatching purse to the sweet little old lady hitting 2 or 3 doctors for legal prescriptions, have one thing in common. We seek our destruction a bag at a time, a few pills at a time, or a bottle at a time, until we die. This is at least part of the insanity of addiction. The price the, the, the price may seem higher for the addict who prostitutes for a fix than it may seem higher for the addict who I just read that prostitutes for a fix, and it is for the addict who merely lies to a doctor. Ultimately, both pay for their disease with their lives. Insanity is repeating these same mistakes and expecting different results. Many of us realize when we get to the program that we've gone back time and again to using though even though we knew that we were destroying our lives. Insanity is using drugs day after day, knowing that only physical and mental destruction comes when we use. The most obvious insanity of the disease is addiction to the obsession to use drugs. Ask yourself this question: do I believe it would be insane to walk up to someone and say, "May I please have a heart attack or a fatal accident?" If you can agree that this would be an insane thing, you should have no problem with the second step. In this program, the first thing we do to stop using drugs, at this point, we begin to feel the pain of living without drugs or anything to replace them. The pain forces us to seek a power greater than ourselves that can relieve our obsession to use. The process of coming to believe is similar for most addicts. Most of us lack a working relationship with a higher power. However, most of us lacked a working relationship with a higher power. We begin to develop this relationship by simply admitting to the possibility of a power greater than ourselves. Most of us have no trouble admitting that addiction had become a destructive force in our lives. Our best efforts resulted in effort in sorry our best efforts resulted in ever greater destruction and despair. At some point, we realized that we needed the help of some power greater than our addiction. Our understanding of a higher power is up to us. No one is going to decide for us. We can call it the group, the program, or we can call it God. The only suggested guidelines are that this power be loving, caring, and greater than ourselves. We don't have to be religious to accept this idea. The point is that we open our minds to believe. We may have difficulty with this, but by keeping an open mind, sooner or later we find the help we need. We talk and listen to others. We saw other people recovering and they told us what was working for them. We begin to see evidence of some power that could not be fully explained. Confronted with this evidence, we begin to accept the evidence of a power greater than ourselves. We can use this power long before we understand it. As we see coincidences and miracles happening in our lives, acceptance becomes trust. We grow to feel comfortable with our higher power as a source of strength. As we learn to trust this power, we begin to overcome our fear of life. The process of coming to believe restores us to sanity. The strength to move into action comes from the belief. We need to accept this step to start on the road to recovery. When we relieve, when our belief has grown, we are ready for step 3. Okay, we'll stop that there, chapter 4, before we go on to step 3. Yeah, like while I was in treatment, I'd say, well, over the years, I I don't know if I ever really believed in a God per se, but I kind of always believed in some kind of higher power, not really knowing what that really is or what that looks like. But once I got into recovery, and like sure over the years, I tried praying for this, praying for that, and nothing ever seemed to work. But when I was in treatment, and I started, I rather than praying for anything that might be considered solidary, I would pray for strength, and I would pray for courage, or if I was, trying to help somebody else out who's also as sick as I was, I would, pray for them rather than, asking for materialistic things. And then, but once I started doing that, things seemed to almost fall into place, like with me getting accepted, you know, getting accepted for a student loan when I went to college. I've never, that was never possible before. And I can honestly say is part of the gifts of recovery is going through that. I just wish I could have been on an actual campus rather than, doing it in Microsoft Zoom meetings or whatever they were. But, next time I'll carry on chapter 4, and we'll go on to step 3. So thank you again. If you want to be a part of my community, hit subscribe, like. I'd love it if you join my community. I even have a goal to see if I can get my community to grow between, maybe 500 and 1,000 subscribers by Christmas. That's my goal. So thank you for joining me today. I feel like there's more that I should be saying, but, sometimes I just start babbling and I just talk, and it turns into be off topic, so I don't want to do that. Thank you again for joining me today, and I look forward to seeing you again tomorrow. Okay, take care, y'all.